The shadow of global conflict looms large, and the Baltic Sea is now a crucial front in a silent war, a theater of unseen sabotage and escalating tensions. Russia's aggressive actions, extending far beyond the conflict in Ukraine, are actively destabilizing critical infrastructure, threatening the very fabric of European security. This isn't just about military might. It's a calculated campaign of disruption, a shadow war waged beneath the waves, where the targets are the arteries of communication and energy. Prepare yourselves, because what we're about to uncover reveals a calculated and terrifying escalation. There will be 6 chapters in this video. Let us start. Chapter 1, The Unseen Threat Below. The Baltic Sea, a seemingly tranquil expanse, has become a hotbed of clandestine activity. The threat extends past Ukraine, with Vladimir Putin's regime not only focusing on keeping Ukrainian territory, but also actively increasing pressure on the Baltics. The primary concern now centers on underwater cables, those fragile lines of communication and power that bind nations together. Suspicious instances of sabotage targeting these submarine cables are occurring frequently. The Russian illegal maritime trade network, often called the Shadow Fleet, is escalating tensions. This region's significance cannot be overstated, as it borders nations crucial to NATO and the EU, including Norway, Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Sweden, and Finland. It's a volatile situation, and the recent countermeasures taken against Russia's clandestine operations are revealing the true stakes at hand. Finland's recent assertive actions, which came unexpectedly, have put the Baltic Sea under a global spotlight, forcing the world to focus on this region. Finland's actions have been a shock, like a bomb dropped on the agenda. Finland's bold move against suspected Russian activities in the Baltic Sea has stunned the world. The Helsinki administration seized a tanker carrying Russian oil intended for Europe. This isn't just about oil, it's about a calculated disruption aimed at undermining the very infrastructure that connects Europe. Moreover, Finland's success is not limited to seizing a tanker. They have unearthed a critical vulnerability, exposing potential threats to vital underwater cables. This development has sparked serious diplomatic concerns and frayed nerves in Moscow, highlighting the strategic importance of the Baltic region. Some experts believe that Finland's latest move has revealed the inner workings of Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic. What is the true nature of this new chapter? How is NATO involved in this story? What is Russia's shadow fleet truly up to? We will look deeper into these questions. The network of underwater cables in the Baltic is complicated. The Russian side is aware that laying fiber optic cables is a demanding and costly endeavor. Private ships are usually used for the deployment, while ocean divers are responsible for the maintenance and repair. However, the Russian Navy, according to reports, has repeatedly tried to damage these cables, aiming to cause disruptions to the west. A variety of destructive forces threaten the cables, including ship anchors, commercial fishing equipment, earthquakes, hurricanes, and sinister interference. This is where the clandestine nature of Russia's operations is most disturbing. A secretive fleet, operating independently yet under the direction of the Russian Navy, is attempting to damage underwater cables in the Baltic through these illicit acts. This is the so-called Shadow Fleet, composed of ships that are not officially recognized. They are of unknown ownership, registered to shell companies, operating outside standard maritime protocols. Because the Shadow Fleet travels clandestine routes and does not utilize automatic identification systems, the Baltic has become a perfect operational environment. While the Baltic waters are an ideal operating zone for this fleet, there are also crucial NATO forces present, countering Russia's illegal activities. Finland has become a main protagonist in exposing Russia's Baltic clandestine activities, exposing Russia's true motives. Finland recently unveiled a significant scandal surrounding Russia's maritime operations, unveiling the true nature of their activities in the region. Chapter 2, Finland's bold move. The Helsinki government announced the seizure of a tanker carrying Russian oil in the Baltic Sea. The ship is under suspicion of being responsible for disruptions to submarine electricity and communication cables between Finland and Estonia. The seized vessel, flagged in the Cook Islands, was identified as the Eagle S. The Finnish Coast Guard boarded the oil tanker and towed the ship into Finnish territorial waters. Robin Lardo, director of the Finnish National Bureau of Investigation, described the incident at a press conference as a very large sabotage, confirming the anchor under the ship caused damage. The Finnish Customs Service also confirmed the seizure of the cargo and has confirmed the belief that the ship is part of Russia's shadow fleet of older tankers. These tankers are allegedly used to evade sanctions imposed by Western countries on the sale of Russian oil. Finland's action is not an isolated incident. It is a pivotal moment that reveals the intricate web of Russia's clandestine maritime strategy. The shadow fleet, as we mentioned previously, is not a new threat, but its activity is escalating, demanding a coordinated response from international authorities. We will discuss the shadow fleet in detail, but first it is important to examine how Estonia is reacting to this situation. In the wake of Russia's shadow fleet becoming a growing threat, Estonia has increased its naval patrols. This followed disruptions to the connection of the Estlink 2 power grid with Finland and 4 telecommunication cables in the Baltic. Estonian Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna shared on social media about the rising suspicions of sabotage following the interruption in the power grid. Tsahkna confirmed that the Estonian Defense Forces have initiated naval patrols to protect the Estlink 1 submarine cable, stressing that his country's naval forces will remain vigilant against the unacceptable operations of the shadow fleet. Estonian Defense Minister Hanno Pevkur also confirmed their decision to deploy their navy near Estlink 1 to defend the energy connection with Finland. The strategic moves by Estonia showcase a collaborative, cohesive strategy among Baltic nations against Russia's increasing aggression. While these nations are actively attempting to limit the operational capabilities of the shadow fleet, some experts close to Moscow suggest that the incidents in the Baltic could be attributed to the mistakes of ship crews or captains. The sheer number of incidents involving damage to underwater infrastructure casts doubt on these claims. It is difficult to accept that these incidents are simply accidents or errors made by captains. Military experts do not believe that dragging ship anchors on the seabed is an accident. The EU has also made it clear that the Baltic situation is not accidental. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, stated on social media that these incidents reveal critical threats to essential infrastructure and pledged to secure Europe's critical assets, including submarine cables. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, stated that the incident was the latest in a series of suspected attacks on critical infrastructure. Kallas stressed that the ship involved is part of Russia's shadow fleet, which presents threats to security and the environment, whilst also funding Russia's war budget. Chapter 3, the international response. Kaja Kallas also mentioned further measures, including sanctions, are being considered to target this fleet, and that they will propose further sanctions. Kallas emphasized that there is no current risk to the region's energy security. The NATO alliance has responded to the state of concern that Russia's shadow fleet has created in the Baltic. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte condemned any attack on essential infrastructure. This includes the disruption of the power grid between Finland and Estonia, and the telecommunication cables in the Baltic. Mark Rutte stated on social media that he had a telephone conversation with Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas regarding the allegations that Russia was behind the interruptions in the electricity grid and the telecommunication cables. Rutte stressed NATO's solidarity with its allies and stated that they will oppose any attack on essential infrastructure. NATO is monitoring the ongoing investigations by Estonia and Finland and is willing to offer support. Following the NATO Secretary General's statements, it is crucial to examine Russia's shadow fleet, which has been the main cause of concern. This fleet consists of vessels that transport Russian oil to different parts of the world, often to countries like China and India. These uninsured ships remain unregistered as they navigate the world's oceans to evade sanctions. Russia's old, often unowned or registered to shell companies, has expanded to over 10% of the global tanker fleet. It accounts for 70% of all Russia's seaborne crude oil trade in April. Western officials have confirmed that almost 600 Russian crude oil and product tankers were in breach of sanctions or at high risk of breaching sanctions. The Russian shadow fleet's operations continued in May. Refueling tankers carrying Russian oil is currently not prohibited in EU ports or territorial waters, as long as the crude oil or petroleum products are purchased below the ceiling price and are en route to a third country. However, bunkering activity in international waters, adjacent to European territorial waters, isn't under the price ceiling regime. The question remains if the shadow tankers are involved in illegal oil trading when bunkering activity is recorded. The growth of Russia's gray oil trade and increased public scrutiny over Moscow's ability to sell its oil poses challenges for policymakers in Brussels and the United States. These challenges come as they are seeking to control the Kremlin's ability to finance the war in Ukraine. The Russian side continues to pressure the Baltic states with its shadow fleet. Apart from Finland's recent seizure of the Russian ship in the strategic area, the shadow fleet is reported to be involved in other problematic situations. Chapter 4. Shadow Fleet Operations. The Andromeda Star, a shadow oil tanker, operated by an unidentified company and sold to unidentified buyers in 2023, collided with a cargo ship near the Danish coast. The tanker's insurance should cover the incident, but because the Andromeda Star is a shadow vessel, it lacked standard Western insurance. Instead, it was insured by a mysterious Russian company, unlikely to provide any form of compensation. Danish taxpayers may never get back the money spent to respond to the incident. Fortunately, the Andromeda Star crashed on its way to Russia with empty tanks. Otherwise, the consequences could have been more severe. Russian shadow ships frequently pass through the Great Belt as they sail from Baltic Sea ports toward the Atlantic. Because many refuse pilotage, the risk of accidents is extremely high, but under international maritime laws, Denmark cannot prevent these ships from entering. Russia is aware of this vulnerability. NATO is currently attempting to address the problem of the shadow fleet. For nearly 12 months, at least 3,100 refueling or bunkering operations involving shadow tankers were observed off the European member states of the United Kingdom and Norway. According to Kepler, the largest shadow fleet refueling activity, which accounts for 45% of the total, with an average of 9 tankers per day, was in the waters off Malta and Greece. The Laconian Gulf in southern Greece has become a critical hub in the oil supply chain where cargo is exchanged between vessels. NATO has intervened repeatedly, as the shadow fleet has increased its shipping activities. Tankers carrying Russian oil off the southern coast of NATO member Greece were forced into the Mediterranean by naval exercises. Normally, this is a zone where the transfer of cargo occurs. The naval drills have become an obstacle to Russia's expanding shadow fleet and oil shipments by sea. After such operations, authorities noticed the disappearance of Russian tankers belonging to the shadow fleet, which had amassed in the region. The tankers that fled the area clustered to the south after the exercises. The exercises were successful in displacing tankers in international waters, just 6 nautical miles off the coast of Laconia, in the southeast of the Peloponnese Islands. NATO's extensive efforts are focused on limiting the financial capability of Putin's regime. The proceeds from the export of oil by the shadow fleet are a critical resource for the Russian military. After the naval exercises conclude, it is likely Putin will redeploy the shadow fleet ships to the Mediterranean or other sea regions in order to illegally export Russian oil. The G7 countries are on high alert against Russia's attempts to create a black market. The G7 price cap allows EU operators to provide trading, brokerage, transportation, and other essential services to support critical energy supplies to third countries. Controlling the expanding gray market remains a key objective for EU sanctions, as Russia's oil trade exceeds the G7 price ceiling. The most recent sanctions update by the G7 countries proposes that vessels in violation should be denied EU services and financial support. The main goal is to cut off Russia's shadow fleet revenue stream. Chapter 5. The Economic Battlefield. The Russian budget anticipates an increase in government revenues by more than 33%, mainly from the energy sector. Meanwhile, Western nations, including the US, are reassessing their financial and material support to Kyiv. This added leeway means that Russia can further expand its war effort in Ukraine. Consequently, the powerful nations in the global arena, particularly the EU, must put an end to the shadow fleet energy shipments, which constitute one of the most significant revenue streams for Russia's aggression. NATO's strategy in this regard is still unclear. For the moment, it is possible to remove shadow fleet ships from the region through naval drills or intimidate them with naval patrols. The expansion of EU sanctions is also a possibility. The question of what will happen in the future does not have a clear answer at the moment. Russia's war against Ukraine has expanded geopolitical tensions from the Baltic to the Black Sea, from the Mediterranean to the waters of the Far East. Finland's seizure of a tanker that is categorized as part of the Shadow Fleet is a new chapter in this naval war. It is imperative for the Scandinavian and Baltic countries, especially Finland, to prevent Russia's Shadow Fleet from disrupting oil transfers and damaging underwater cables in the Baltic. Russia's recent actions represent a threat not only in Ukraine, but also around the Baltic Sea. The oil trade through the Shadow Fleet fills Moscow's war budget, while sabotage attempts against underwater cables threaten Europe's security. Finland's critical actions have helped expose these illegal activities to the world. This is where the Baltic states and NATO step in, as they seek to restrict the Shadow Fleet's operational range, protect underwater cables, and undermine Russia's energy revenues. In the short term, a solution appears to be elusive. However, every decisive step serves as a further challenge to the Kremlin's ambitions to dominate the Baltic as it sees fit. Chapter 6: The Unforeseen Twist. As NATO continues to grapple with the Shadow Fleet menace, a new element has entered the picture. It has been discovered that the Russian Shadow Fleet is not only composed of oil tankers, it now includes specially modified vessels that appear to be using cutting-edge deep-sea robotics and are capable of performing more complex underwater cable sabotage operations that involve more than just dragging an anchor. Recent intelligence suggests that these newly equipped ships are capable of deploying remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, that carry sophisticated cutting and disrupting tools that can operate with high precision at great depths. These new revelations mean that NATO's earlier tactics of merely disrupting and displacing surface ships may not be enough to counter this new form of attack. The deployment of ROVs and their use in cable sabotage indicates a dangerous escalation in Russia's tactics, moving beyond simple disruption to strategic infrastructure damage. This new reality demands a fundamental reevaluation of defense protocols and the implementation of next-generation technologies for submarine infrastructure protection. The game has changed, and the stakes have become even higher. Remember to watch till the end, as there are important conclusions at the very end. Conclusion. We've explored the complex web of intrigue and confrontation playing out in the Baltic Sea. We've seen how Russia, through its Shadow Fleet, is not just trying to undermine Ukraine, but also attacking the very security infrastructure of Europe. Finland's assertive actions have unveiled the extent of Russia's clandestine operations, shining a light on a hidden war that threatens the stability of the region. However, the recent discovery of the Shadow Fleet utilizing ROVs for cable sabotage means that the conflict is entering a new phase. NATO's ability to adapt to this new threat is going to determine the safety and security of the region. The coming weeks and months will be pivotal as the conflict continues to develop.